Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shir. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Amir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Beis Amud Beis, continuing on in learning Hilchos Shabbos. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yirachem Aleihem V'Yetziam Yitzar L'Lervacha Me'afela La'ira U'Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagala U'Vizman Kariv. Amen. So yesterday, at the outset of Hilchos Shabbos on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, the Mechaber told us an interesting halacha. The Mechaber told us that even somebody who has to come on to tzedakah is not potter from Einik Shabbos. And the Mishnah Berurah explained. The Mishnah Berurah told us that we have three different Mamorei Chazal. Each one of these Mamorei Chazal seem to give us a shear, if you will, as to what you have to do to be Mekayim Einik Shabbos and Kibbutz Shabbos. So the Mishnah Berurah told us you have one Mamorei Chazal that tells us that you have to be Mechabed Shabbos and before Einik Shabbos Kidaboy. You have to do it with a fullness. You have to go get prime rib, some beautiful salmon, etc., etc. We have another Mamorei Chazal that tells us even with a little davar mu'it, even with kased daharsana, a little fried fish, you could be Mekayim Einik Shabbos. Then we have a third Mamorei Chazal where Rabbi Akiva says if somebody is poor, asay Shabbat chachol, he should make his Shabbos like a weekday. Val titzarech lebrios, he should not spend extra on Einik Shabbos and put himself into a position where he might chas v'shalom become a tzarech la'acherim. So those were the three Mamorei Chazal that we have. Now the Mishnah Berurah explained that there's no kasha. These three Mamorei Chazal do not contradict each other. The Mishnah Berurah explained to us that each one is talking about a different person. The Mamorei Chazal that says that you have to go all out for Einik Shabbos, that's a man of means. A person of means, he should go all out for covered Shabbos. The Mamorei Chazal that says do a little something, kased da'arsana, extra for Einik Shabbos, that's talking about somebody who's not a man of means. He could put down 3 su'udais for Shabbos, and, he's okay. Says Chazal, that person, he should at least spend a little extra, get epis kased daharsana for Einik Shabbos. And lastly, Rabbi Akiva, who said, asay Shabbat chachol v'al titzarech lebrios, that's talking about somebody who's under very, very pressing financial circumstances. He could just make it to put down 2 sudais, not even 3 sudais, for Shabbos. About him, Rabbi Akiva says, okay, you are potter from Einik Shabbos. Why? Because asay Shabbat chachol v'al titzarech lebrios. Don't go ahead and spend money on Einik Shabbos and put yourself in a position where you're going to have to come on to tzedakah. We said yesterday that none of those 3 categories fit the halacha of the Mechaber. The Mechaber is talking about somebody who's tzarech la'acherim. Neither one of these 3 individuals are tzarech la'acherim. Therefore, the Mishnah Berurah explained that the Mechaber is talking about a 4th category. Who is the 4th category? The 4th category is somebody who is already titzarech lebrios. He's already coming on to tzedakah. He's going to the Gabbai tzedakah, and the Gabbai tzedakah is giving him what he needs for Shabbos. What's the Gabbai tzedakah going to give him? He's going to give him mazayin shalosh su'udais and a little bit extra for Einik Shabbos, kased daharsana, because that's what a yid is supposed to have for Kibbutz Shabbos. Rabbi Akiva, asay Shabbat chachol v'al titzarech lebrios, that's talking about somebody who does not yet need to go to tzedakah, because he has the bare minimums to get by. He has mazayin shtei sudais. He's not coming to the Gabbai tzedakah. So by him, Rabbi Akiva says, asay Shabbat chachol v'al titzarech lebrios. But the person who can't even make it, he can't even put down 2 sudais for Shabbos, he's already titzarech lebrios, he's already at the Gabbai tzedakah door, that's the person about whom the Mechaber is saying, that person, if he has a couple of dollars in his pocket, he should take mazayin gimel sudais and kased daharsana from the Gabbai tzedakah, and then he should go out and spend epis, he should spend $2 and do something for Einik Shabbos. So that was the halacha of the Mechaber yesterday. Now, continuing on Daf Beis Amud Aleph, the bottom line, V'loi Amru, now the Mechaber is going to speak out some of this very clearly, and the Mechaber is going to tell us that Rabbi Akiva's memra of Asay Shabbat Chachol V'al Titztarech L'Briyos is talking about somebody who's not yet coming on to tzedakah. That's talking about somebody who has Mazon Shtei Sudos. So about him, he technically is potter. He's potter from Einik Shabbos. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't even need Kasa de Harsana. That's the person that Rabbi Akiva says, Asay Shabbat Chachol V'al Titztarech L'Briyos. Now, the Mishnah Berurah did speak out yesterday that even this person should try as much as he can, and we'll see what that means in the Mishnah Berurah today, to do something for Einik Shabbos and to have Shalish Seudos. But let's pick up the Mechaber here on the bottom line, Beis Amud Aleph. Says the Mechaber, V'loi amru asay Shabbat chachol v'al titztarech l'briyos. This member of Rabbi Akiva, asay Shabbat chachol v'al titztarech l'briyos, was not said, ella only lemisha hasha dechuka loy b'yoser, for somebody who is in very, very dire financial circumstances, the fellow who only has Mazon Beis Seudos. That's the person that's potter from Einik Shabbos, Asay Shabbat Chachol V'al Titztarech L'Briyos. Continues the Mechaber. Now that we understand who Rabbi Akiva was talking about, now, says the Mechaber, the other individual that I opened up Sif Aleph with, the one who's already Tzarech L'Acherim, he does have to extend himself and be Mezaris himself to spend epis from his own money to do something for Kavod Shabbos. But what should he do? This is a person who's already coming on to tzedakah. He really doesn't have. That's why he's by tzedakah. So how's he going to go ahead and spend money for Einik Shabbos? Says the Mechaber on the top line of Beis Amud Beis, Al Kain, therefore, this individual, tzarech letzamtzem b'sha'or yamim, the rest of the days of the week he has to spend very, very carefully, and he has to skimp. Kedei lechabed haShabbos, so that when Shabbos comes along, after he goes to the Gabet Tzedakah and gets Mazon Gimel Sudas and Kasa D'Harsana, he should have something on his own to spend for Kavod Shabbos. Let's turn back to Beis Amud Aleph and let's see the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Gimel that starts on the very bottom line. Lemi shahashad dechuka loy b'yoser. Okay, so now, the person that is hashad chuka loy b'yoser, again, at the risk of being extremely repetitive, this is the person who has Mazon Beis Seudos. He is potter from Einik Shabbos. About him, Rabbi Akiva said, Asay Shabbat chachol v'al titztarech l'briyos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, however, turning to Beis Amud Beis, Umayri, when we say that this person is potter from Einik Shabbos, and he should only have Mazon Beis Seudos, not even Shalosh Seudos, Umayri, kishe'ein loy mashkonos, where he does not have any assets that he could use as collateral, lilvos alehem, to borrow against them. Ubaloy mashkoin, and without a collateral, and yochel hasik, he's unable to borrow. So says the Mishnah Berurah, the person who only has Mazon Shtei Seudos, and we're saying that he's potter from Shalosh Seudos, and he's potter from any Einik Shabbos, even Kasa D'Harsana, that's only if he can't borrow money. If he has something to use as collateral, and he could go to somebody and borrow a few dollars, then he has to borrow. Di'ilavachi, because if it's not this way, if he's able to borrow, tzarech lilvos, he's got to borrow money, kedei shelo levatel mi mitzvah Einik Shabbos, so that he should not be mevatel the mitzvah of Einik Shabbos. Remember, we saw yesterday there are those poskim that say Einik Shabbos is a daraisa because Shabbos is called a mikra kodesh. So you're able to borrow, go borrow. Ukemosh amru Chazal, and this is like Chazal tell us in Masechtas Beitza Tesvav Amud Beis, she'omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Banai, my children, levu alai, borrow on my back, borrow on my shoulders, vani pareya, and don't worry, I'll pay. And if you take a look at Sharet Zion Ois Katan Yud Beis, he writes over here, the Chavetz Chaim, Kain mashma mehagra. The gra is mashma this way, that you have to go ahead and you have to borrow. V'chein kasef abach, de'im yachol lahasik bimi lilvos. If you're able to find somebody to borrow money from, to be able to be B'kayim Einik Shabbos, tzarech lilvos. You got to borrow. Now remember who we're talking about over here. We're talking about somebody who only has Mozain Beis Seudais. This guy doesn't have any money in the bank. He has enough to go ahead and buy a couple of challahs, more than a couple, he needs like a mishnah for 2 meals, and put epis on the table for 2 Seudais. We're saying, you're able to borrow for Einik Shabbos, to be Mekayim Einik Shabbos. How are you going to pay back? The Rebbeinu Shalom says, Levu alai banai v'ani pareya. V'yivtach b'Hashem, continues the Chavetz Chaim in the Shar Tzion, v'yivtach b'Hashem, trust the Rebbeinu Shalom, shehu yazrenu, that he will help, l'shalom loy, that he'll be able to pay. Uba Teres Ikenim mashma, in the Sefer Teres Ikenim, the Chavetz Chaim says it's mashma, the lo yilveh, that you should not borrow, el im kein hu misha'er sheyeh loy b'melech fraya. Unless you know that you're going to be able to pay back. You have to have a plan. The Teres Ikenim says, don't just go ahead and borrow, you have to have a plan. But the Mishnah Berurah ends off, v'nireh, it would appear to me, the hakoil lefi ha'inyan. Now those are very ambiguous words. What exactly is the Chavetz Chaim saying? So if you take a look in the Dirshu footnote number 19, Ubir Dvarav Hagayin Reb Nissim Karelitz, Reb Nissim Karelitz explained these ambiguous words of the Chavetz Chaim in the Shar Tzion, that hakol lefi ha'inyan, he says, Sha'af l'das hagra, even according to the Gra, who says go ahead and borrow and trust the Rebbeinu Shalom, lo yehutar la'adam lilvais ela kifi yecholtai. You should only borrow something that makes sense, that l'chayra, a person of your standing will somehow be able to come back and pay it. Aval also lilvais k'dei lechol kisu d'shleima b'shaitai. But don't go ahead and borrow money so that you can go to the fanciest store in town and buy prime rib. V'haisif, but Reb Nissim Karelitz adds, Sha'akol tali b'midas b'tchaynai shel adam. In reality, it depends on your personal level of emunah and bitachon. Ukemay shamar, like Chazal say, levu alai. Rebbeinu Shalom says, borrow on me, v'ha'eminu bi, have faith in me, v'ani pareya, and I'll pay. V'habetech b'kach be'emunah shleima. Somebody who really has emunah and bitachon that the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to help him to perform Einik Shabbos. Yachal lilvais afilu k'dei suda shleima b'shaitai. You don't have $1 in your pocket? Yes, borrow money to go buy prime rib and trust the Rebbeinu Shalom. The Rebbeinu Shalom will pay. Ubelvad, but the caveat is ubelvad shegam b'shar inyonav hu bal madrega b'midas habitachon. You could only do this if you're a true bal bitachon. If you always have bitachon in the Rebbeinu Shalom, if whenever it comes to parnasa, you have bitachon in the Rebbeinu Shalom, and you say, it's okay, I'll go learn Daf Yomi. I'm not worried. I don't have to work overtime. Right now, you don't have enough money? Okay, I put in my ishtadlus for today. Now I can go learn. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants to give me, he'll give me. If you have bitachon in the Rebbeinu Shalom throughout your life, so then you could have bitachon in the Rebbeinu Shalom here too. It always reminds me of listening to the Klosterberger Rebbe, Zechet Tzaddik V'Kadosh L'Vracha, in a Chumash Rashi shir, when he was talking about how he opened up a new koil to learn Choshed Mishpat. And he promised the Bnei HaKoil a very chashav stipend for learning Choshed Mishpat. The fundraisers came over to him for the fundraisers for the Klosterberger Moistus. They came to the Rebbe and they said, Rebbe, where's the money coming from? The Rebbe said, what? I ever demanded money from the Rebbeinu Shalom and he didn't give it to me? I opened up a yeshiva, the money was there. I opened up a koil, the money was there. I opened up Mifal HaShas, the money was there. Whenever I came to the Rebbeinu Shalom and I said, I need money for what? For me? For a car? No. I need money for you. I need money to increase limud HaTorah. I need money to increase your Shemayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom always gave it, so what's the problem? The Rebbeinu Shalom will give it. So if you have that level of bitachon, yes. Ulevu alai banai v'ani paireya. Now, the Mechaber said over here that this indigent fellow, who has the Mechaber was talking about the fellow who already came on to tzedakah. This fellow came on to tzedakah. He's getting multi-chal students because of the harsana for the gabbai tzedakah. He should extend himself to spend some extra money kedei lechabed haShabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and dalit. You know, you're going to go ahead and you're going to extend yourself for kibbutz Shabbos. You're spending money. I mean, this is mamish an indigent fellow. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Not a problem to tell this person to spend money for kibbutz Shabbos. Shabbos for Yom Tov, because when it comes to expenses that you spend for Shabbos and for Yom Tov, Chazal tell us in Moisif, if you add on money, if you spend extra for Shabbos, if you spend extra for Yom Tov, Moisif and Loi, the Rebbeinu Shalom will add on for you. Ukubay Shamar Chazal, like Chazal tell us again in Masechtas Beitza, Kol mezainos shel Adam, all of a person's mezainos, all of a person's money that he's going to have for the year to be able to spend for the things that he needs, kitzuvin loy. That amount of money is a set amount of money. You have a fixed income. No matter what you do, you think, oh, I don't have a fixed income. I'm a hedge fund manager. My income goes up and down. 1 month, I make a ton of money. Next month, I'm not living on a fixed income. No, it's not true. Every person is living on a fixed income. Why? Because on Rosh Hashanah, the Rebbe shall paskin already what you're going to have. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, it's very important for a person to know, v'yesh li zayer, a person has to be careful, shelo yosef bahen, not to go ahead and spend moisaros. Don't go ahead and spend extra money. You're walking around in Nissan, and you're going ahead and you're spending money on this and on that and the other thing. Realize that you're making withdrawals from an account that has a fixed set amount of money. And it's not going to go up, because the Rabbeinu Shalom set the amount of money you're going to have on Rosh Hashanah. So every dime that you spend, you are making withdrawals from that fixed account. And pen like katzaloi kolkach. You don't know what the balance is in that account. You can't go online and check that balance, because it doesn't matter what you have in the bank. It doesn't matter what you have in savings. It doesn't matter what you have in the 401k. It all doesn't matter. The amount of money that's going to be available to you for the year was set on Rosh Hashanah, and you don't know the balance. So be careful what you spend during the year, because maybe you'll run out. Chutz, says the Chafetz Chaim, with the exception of Me'etzai Shabbos v'Yom Tov. When it comes to money that you spend on Kavod and Oinik Shabbos and Kavod and Oinik Yom Tov, that's different. Also, V'hitzais banav l'Talmud Torah. You want to hire a tutor to learn extra Tosfos with your 8th grader before he goes to Mesivta? You want to hire a tutor to learn extra Bein Astarim for your Mesivta Bacher? That money also. Go ahead, hire a tutor. Spend $2,000 a month on a tutor. Don't worry about, I don't have the money. No, don't worry. That is She'im Moisif, by these expenses. Shabbos, Yom Tov, Eitzos Banav Talmud Torah, if you spend extra, Moisif and Lai, the Rabbeinu Shalom will make extra deposits into your account. Your account balance was set on Rosh Hashanah, but you're spending money on Shabbos, you're spending money on Yom Tov, you're spending money on Eitzos Banav Talmud Torah, the Rabbeinu Shalom will make a new deposit. He normally doesn't do that, but for these things he will. Now, there's a Sharitzian over here, Ois Katan Yud Gimel, where the Sharitzian says, he brings this down, this explanation of Mezainos of Shalada B'Ksuvin Lem Rosh Hashanah Vad Rosh Hashanah Chutz Me'etzai Shabbos V'Yom Tov Eitzos Banav Talmud Torah. Brings it down from Rashi. Says the Chafetz Chaim, U'ba'avoinoseinu harabim yesh anoshim shemahapchin haseder. There are people who turn this upside down. What does that mean, that they turn it upside down? To spend money on the Rabbeinu Shalom, they're afraid. To spend money on Shabbos and Yom Tov and Haitzos Banav Talmud Torah, over there they skimp. But to get the most expensive lease for the latest model car, for the latest QX or Lexus or whatever's hot nowadays, or Tesla, I don't know what's hot, or Rivian, that they go ahead and spend. For a Spanish tile for the house, that they spend. You know, for the latest suit, that they spend. And the Mahapach to Seder. And says the Chafetz Chaim, Uban al yidei zeh lidei gezel. They end up coming to gezel because of this, because they run out of money. So they start playing funny business with their money. V'chil Hashem. Or they end up on the front page of the paper for being involved in some financial scam. We've all heard the stories. Why is this? Because they spend moisaros. Because they spend extra money that they shouldn't be spending. Now, we said over here that even the person who is hashad chukaloi b'yoser, even the person who has mozain shtei sudos, he only has enough money to put 2 sudos down on the table. And we said that me'ikar hadin, this person is even potter from Einik Shabbos. Really, he's potter from Einik Shabbos. We said that the person who's already taking from tzedakah, if he has a couple of dollars in his pocket, he's not potter from Einik Shabbos. He should spend something on Einik Shabbos. We said in the Mishnah Berurah at the beginning of this year, here on Beis and Beis, we said the person that is Hashad Chukaloi B'Yoser, that we said is Potter from Einik Shabbos, that's only if he can't borrow. But if he could borrow, he has to borrow. Now, how far does that go? When we say that if you could borrow, you should borrow, how about if you have to borrow and you have to pay interest? So you have a credit card. Your credit card is a $10,000 spending limit. You haven't used it. Baruch Hashem, you're very financially responsible. And if you do use your credit card, you make sure to pay the principal balance every month so you don't get bitten by neshech, you don't get bitten by ribis. But you do have a credit card in your pocket, and you could go to the takeout store and you could spend on the credit card. So we just said that you should borrow. But now you're borrowing on ribis. If you're not going to be able to pay back the principal, you're going to pay nowadays maybe 23, 25, 26% interest. Should you do that? Says the Mishnah Berurah. We're in the Mishnah Berurah here on Beis and Beis, right by the Ois Cotton Yud Daled for the Sharet Tzion, about a third of the way down. Loivin beribis. You borrow money on interest. L'tzarich Suda Shabbos, for the needs of Suda Shabbos, or Sudas Mitzvah, or for a real Sudas Mitzvah. You got to make a bris, go ahead and spend money, borrow money on interest. You got to make a Suda Shabbos, and you're just totally depleted financially, go ahead and borrow money on ribis. Now the Mishnah Berurah says, what does this mean that you should borrow money by ribis? Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'hainu me'eina Yehudi. Obviously, we're talking about borrowing from a non-Jew, because a Yid, you're not allowed to borrow money with ribis from a Yid, and he's not allowed to lend you money with ribis. So it can't be talking about borrowing from a Yid, says the Mishnah Berurah. So it must be speaking about borrowing from an Eina Yehudi, the credit card. Or, says the Mishnah Berurah, Yisrael b'derech heter. Or there are ways of borrowing money with ribis from a Yid b'derech heter. You make a heter iska. So the Mishnah Berurah learns that this concept of loivin beribis, which he brings down from the Magen Avram, when the Magen Avram says borrow money with ribis, l'tzarich Suda Shabbos, that has to be talking about ba'ofen heter. So says the Mishnah Berurah. Now, first of all, you should know that that's the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. The Shulchan Aruch HaRav disagrees. The Shulchan Aruch HaRav says that when the Magen Avram says that you should borrow money with ribis for Suda Shabbos and for Sudas Mitzvah, it means even if you're borrowing from a Yid in a way that would normally be aser because it would be ribis derabanan. It would be avak ribis. If it would be ribis daraisa you cannot do for Suda Shabbos. But if it would be ribis derabanan, the Shulchan Aruch HaRav says that's mutter l'tzarich Suda Shabbos. So we have a machlokes over here. The Mishnah Berurah is the Mishnah Berurah here. The Mishnah Berurah says not that way. The Mishnah Berurah says no, only ba'ofen heter. Now, if it's like the Mishnah Berurah, that the Magen Avram is only talking about ba'ofen heter, what's the big chiddush? I'll tell you what the big chiddush is. The big chiddush is a Gemara in Erechin. The Gemara in Erechin talks about how bad ribis is. And the Gemara in Erechin says what at face value is an astonishing thing. I wrote down the lashon here of the Gemara in Erechin. The Gemara in Erechin, Lamed Abed Beis says, Nicha le'inish, it's better for a person, delizavin brate, that he should sell his daughter, who's a ketana, as an amma ha'ivriya, v'loy lezif beribisa, and he should not borrow on ribis. You hear this Gemara? Sell your ketana daughter to be an amma ha'ivriya before you go ahead and borrow money beribis. Now, there's a couple of things about this Mamar Chazal that you have to understand. First of all, generally speaking, when people hear about selling your daughter, who's a ketana, as an amma ha'ivriya, right away what flashes in their mind is, you're selling your daughter into slavery? Even if they don't use the word slavery, you're selling your daughter into servitude? What, you should sell your daughter into servitude before you should borrow money beribis? So the first thing you have to understand is that the Torah HaKdosha, the concept of selling your daughter as an amma ha'ivriya, is beferish in the Torah. So the Torah HaKdosha has the concept of selling your daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya. And certainly the Torah Kedosha is not telling you, oh, you're poor and you need to raise capital, sell your daughter into servitude. This is not slavery. This is not servitude. Let's remember what it means when somebody sells his daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya. So you have a person who's, again, in very dire financial straits. He can't feed his family. He's got a young daughter. He's got a daughter who's a ketana. This is a person who can't take care of his family. He doesn't have enough money. So the Torah Kedosha has a suggestion for him. What's the suggestion? Sell your daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya. Now, what happens when you sell a girl as an Amma Ha'ivriya? So Reuven sells his daughter to Shimon as an Amma Ha'ivriya. Well, as soon as Reuven sells his daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya to Shimon, there is a mitzvah incumbent upon Shimon to be miyayid this girl, which means to take her as a wife. Not only that, but the money that Shimon pays Reuven is selling his daughter as a ketana to Shimon. So Shimon takes $1,000, and Shimon gives $1,000 to Reuven. You know what that money is? That money is kesef kedushin. That's what that money is. If Shimon has the intent to marry the girl, so then the $1,000 that he gives Reuven is kesef kedushin. And now Shimon is married to Reuven's daughter. Now that Shimon is married to Reuven's daughter, what happens to Reuven's daughter? Reuven's daughter is a wife in every sense of the word. She's not an inferior wife. She's not a second-rate wife. No, she's a full-fledged wife. Not only is she a full-fledged wife, I'll tell you something interesting. Where in the Torah HaKedosha does the Torah HaKedosha spell out what the chiyuvim are from a husband to a wife? You know where? In the parsha of Amma Ha'ivriya. Nowhere in the Torah HaKedosha does it say, Ki yikach ish isha. If a man marries a woman, he has to supply her with mezainos, he has to supply her with clothing, he has to supply her properly with physical relations, etc., etc. It doesn't say that anywhere. So how do we know? How do we know what the obligations are from a husband to a wife? You know why? Because by a Amma Ha'ivriya, the Torah HaKedosha says there's a mitzvah on the purchaser to make this Amma Ha'ivriya his wife, and when he does, he has to treat her like a full-fledged wife, and therefore, she'era ksusa v'ainasa la yigra. So the Torah chose to put the obligations of a husband to a wife in the parsha of Amma Ha'ivriya. So you're not selling your daughter into servitude. What you're doing is you're selling your daughter, you're marrying her off. You're raising capital by marrying off your daughter, and now you're guaranteed that your daughter will be well taken care of. Now, what if the purchaser does not want to marry this girl? Well, then he has an obligation to marry her off to his son. And then the same thing will happen. She'll be a full-fledged wife and she'll be taken care of. What if the purchaser doesn't want to marry her and doesn't want to marry her off to his son? Well, in that case, there is now a mitzvah on the father who sold her to redeem her as soon as humanly possible. And this is where the Gemara in Erechim comes in. What did the Gemara say? The Gemara said it's better for a person to sell his daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya than to borrow money on ribbis. What does one have to do with the other? The answer is, in both cases, an indigent person is trying to raise capital. He has a choice of two ways to raise capital. He could raise $1,000 by borrowing it at 25%. Or he could sell his daughter, who's an Amma Ha'ivriya. Now, in both cases, he may have to pay the money back. If he borrows the money on ribbis, he certainly has to pay the money back. He took a loan, he has to pay it back. Not only does he have to pay it back, he has to pay it back with ribbis. He borrowed it at an exorbitant rate, it's going to cost him a fortune. So it's going to cost him way more than the $1,000 that he borrowed. So he raised $1,000 capital, and down the line, there's going to be neshech, it's going to bite him in the back, and he's going to pay back a lot more than he borrowed. Or he could sell his daughter as an Amma Ha'ivriya, and he could raise $1,000 capital that way. If the purchaser marries the girl, fine. He got $1,000 capital as kesef kedushin. His daughter is married off. Everything's fine. He's never going to have to pay the money back. If the purchaser does not perform yiyud, and the girl doesn't get married, so then the mitzvah on the father is to buy the girl back. So he's going to have to pay the money back. But how much is it going to cost him? So let's see. Let's say when you sell an Amma Ha'ivriya, she has an expiration date. She goes free either when she physically matures, when she shows Siman Nairus, she's going to go free, or she's going to go free at the end of 6 years. She can't be an Amma Ha'ivriya more than 6 years. So she's going to go free. So you know how the father redeems her? The way the father redeems her is, we look at the term of her Amma Ha'ivriya. How long is she going to be an Amma Ha'ivriya? Let's say she's almost a Nara. Let's say it's 2 years short of her becoming a Nara. So she's going to be an Amma Ha'ivriya for 2 years. The fellow bought her for $1,000. That's $500 a year. Let's say it takes a year until the father can afford to redeem her. Well, the purchaser already had her services as an Amma Ha'ivriya for a year. So he got $500 worth of value already. So now, for the father to redeem her, it only costs $500. So how much is the father paying back for the $1,000 capital that he raised? He's paying back $500. So by ribis, the amount that you have to pay back is always going up. By an Amma Ha'ivriya, it's always going down, if indeed you're ever going to have to repay it. So that's why the Gemara says, Nicha leile inish delizavin brate. It's better that someone should sell his daughter to raise emergency capital than to borrow baribis. Still in all, what did we have here? The Mishnah Berurah told us that you should even borrow baribis, ba'ofen heter, l'tzarech suda Shabbos. And again, don't worry. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, "Levu alai banai v'ani pareya." Let's go weiter in the Mishnah Berurah. We're right by the Ois Cotton Tezvav for the Sharet Zion. The Mishnah Berurah tells us a very interesting. No, we're a line under that. Im sholchu. The Mishnah Berurah tells us a very interesting halacha. Let's say you have an ani, and somebody knows that this person is struggling, so he sends him food for Shabbos. He made some beautiful salmon for Friday night. He sent the ani salmon that he should have a beautiful Suda Friday night. Says the Mishnah Berurah, is the ani allowed to do whatever he wants with this salmon? Im sholchu loy dvar Michael sheyechlenu b'Shabbos. If somebody sent the ani food for Shabbos, lo yechlenu b'chayil. He's not allowed to eat it during the week. It was sent for Shabbos. Kain kasav b'sefer Chasidim. So says the Sefer Chasidim. V'ayin lekamon b'simin tafresh tzadik dalet sif beis. The Das Shulchan Aruch Sham. It's the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch over there in Hilchos Megillah. The ha'ani yachal l'shanois, that an ani is allowed to divert the money that he receives b'migvas Purim. If an ani received money to be able to make a sudas Purim, he's allowed to divert that money and use it for whatever he wants. After gavu l'tzarech Purim, even though it was collected l'tzarech Purim. Achein, based on that psak of the Shulchan Aruch and Hilchos Megillah, gam sham. Achein, however, gam sham. Even over there in Hilchos Megillah, yesh machmirin bazer. That are those who are machmir and say that the ani is not allowed to divert it. Ayin batur sham. So what's the halacha the Mishnah Berurah just said? The Mishnah Berurah just said, if an ani receives food for Shabbos, he's not allowed to eat it during the week. Says the Mishnah Berurah links this to a halacha in Hilchos Megillah that talks about an ani receiving funds for the Sudas Purim. This is all based on a Gemara that discusses Migvas Purim, that discusses what happens when money is collected for Purim. The question is, the Gaboy Tzedakah raised money from people to give out to Aniyim so that they should have a Sudas Purim. The Gemara says that the Gaboyim are not allowed to divert that money and use it for something else. So if, let's say the Gaboyim collected $5,000 to give out for Sudas Purim, then they realize they don't need so much. They only need $3,500. They have $1,500 extra. The Gaboyim cannot just go ahead and decide we're using that $1,500 for something else. Why? Because why did people give it? The people gave it for Purim. If the people gave it for Purim, it has to be used for Purim. Now the shaila is, okay, so the Gaboy Tzedakah give out all the money to Aniyim. Now the Ani gets it. Is the Ani also bound by this restriction? Is he also not allowed to divert it? Or once the Ani receives it, he can do with it whatever he will. The Mechaber paskins that once the Ani gets it, the Ani could do with it whatever he will. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this halacha is linked to this halacha that the Sefer Hasidim says. The Sefer Hasidim says an ani gets food for Shabbos, he has to use it for Shabbos. Why? because the person gave it to him for Shabbos. To divert it for Sunday or Monday, that is a significant change from what the donor wanted. The donor only gave it to the ani for Suda Shabbos. He didn't give it for Suda Sunday. And therefore the Sefer Hasidim says you cannot divert it. Now, the Paiskim discuss, is this Lifnim Mishur Sadin? Is this Me'ikar Adin? The Chavis Yair suggests that it's Me'ikar Adin. Others say that no, it's Lifnim Mishur Sadin. Okay. Now we go weiter. So let's go weiter here in the Shulchan Aruch, top line, Beis Amid Beis, says the Mechaber. Mitakonas Ezra. The Gemara in Baba Kama brings down several different takonas that Ezra made. One of them is sheyu mechabsim begodim b'chamishi b'Shabbos. One of the takonas were that you should do laundry on Thursday. Why, says the Mechaber? Mipnei kavod Shabbos. You should do laundry on Thursday, mipnei kavod Shabbos. Now, there are two ways that you could read this, and that's what the Mishnah Berurah is really going to be discussing. You can understand this two ways. One is that the takonas Ezra was, do laundry on Thursday, not on Friday. Why? Mipnei kavod Shabbos. What does that mean? If you do laundry on Shabbos, laundry back in the day was a major involvement. If you do laundry on Erev Shabbos, then you're not going to be spending time frying onions for the challah on Erev Shabbos. So I want you to do your laundry on Thursday, so you should be able to properly prepare for Shabbos on Friday. That's one way you could understand the Takanas Ezra. Another way you could understand the Takanas Ezra, they say commas save lives, right? Let's go eat grandma. No, it's let's go eat, comma, grandma, not let's go eat grandma. So too over here. The other way to understand this is that Takanas Ezra was, do laundry on Thursday. Why? For kavod Shabbos. Do laundry on Thursday so you should have clean clothes. L'kavod Shabbos, you have to have fresh, clean clothes. So do laundry on Thursday. Well, why not do it on Friday? Oh, just practically speaking, it doesn't make sense to do it on Friday. On Friday, you're busy. Do it on Thursday. But this is the question. Was the Takanas Ezra to protect Friday so that you could spend time on Friday l'kavod Shabbos? Or was the Takanas Ezra that you should have clean clothes? And Thursday was just a practical concern. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Hey. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaber said that the Takanas Ezra was do laundry on Thursday, mipnei kavod Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what does that mean? Hainu kedei shiyu levanim l'Shabbos. It means so that you should have fresh, clean clothes for Shabbos. That's the Takana. Thursday, lafuke Friday, that's a practical concern. Avaloi b'erev Shabbos, but don't do it on Erev Shabbos. Why? Because we want you busy on Erev Shabbos taking care of Shabbos needs. But that's a practical concern. The Ikatakana was do laundry before Shabbos, so you should have clean clothes. Says the Mishnah Berurah, according to this understanding, it comes out, tzarech lizar, a person has to be careful, don't wear the same shirt 3 Shabbosim in a row, even if you were very careful to keep it clean. Why? Because Takanas Ezra is wear a freshly laundered shirt for Shabbos. If you have a 3-day Yom Tov, don't wear on Shabbos the shirt that you wore yesterday for Yom Tov. It's still clean. Yeah, but it's not a freshly laundered garment. The Takanas Ezra is freshly laundered garment. Kadesh lavar al Takanas Ezra. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Ramah. Hago. Second line down, here on Beis of Beis. Noyagin lolush kidei shir challah babayis. The minig is that when you're baking challah for Shabbos, you should make sure to bake a shir challah. So, noyagin lolush kidei shir challah. Bake enough that you have a mitzvah to be mafresh challah. Lasis behem lechamim livtzaya aleim b'Shabbos for Yom Tov, to make chalas that you're going to make the bracha on for Shabbos and Yom Tov. Vehu, and I'm going to explain this the way the Mishnah Berurah does. Vehu, the inyan to bake for Shabbos, not the inyan to bake a shir challah. The inyan to bake for Shabbos, vehu mikvoid Shabbos for Yom Tov. That is an ikar part of kavod Shabbos and Yom Tov, to bake fresh bread for Shabbos. Ve'ein l'shanos, and we shouldn't go away from this minute. Let's see it in the Mishnah Berurah. Ois katan vav kedei shir challah. Hainu explains the Mishnah Berurah the way I just explained it. Mishnah Berurah says, what does the Ramah mean? Milavad shahalisha v'ha'afiyah hu miklal kvoid Shabbos v'Yom Tov. Besides the fact that going ahead and baking challah is an Indian of Kavod Shabbos for Yom Tov, don't go to the bakery and buy challah. And this is going to be spelled out beferish in an astonishing biur halacha. Don't go ahead to the bakery and buy challah. No, bake challah. Because baking challah is v'hu mikvayt Shabbos for Yom Tov. But besides that, milavad shalisha v'afiyu hu miklak kvayt Shabbos for Yom Tov, k'moisha b'sayim l'b'soif, oid yesh bazeh tam, there's another reason, k'dei l'kayim mitzvahs challah. There's another Inyan, a second Inyan. When you bake, and baking is very important because v'hu mikvayt Shabbos for Yom Tov, when you bake a shir challah. Why should you bake a shir challah? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lefi she'ibda es Adam Harishain, because on Erev Shabbos, Chava gave Adam Harishon from the Eitz Hadas. And by doing that, she, so to speak, destroyed Adam Harishon. Adam Harishon did a chet. Not only did she destroy, so to speak, Adam Harishon, Misa was brought into the world. The struggle for Parnasa was brought into the world. The world was completely and irrevocably altered by this Aveira. And the way Chazal put it is, Lefi she'ibda es Adam Harishain, shahaya chalasai shel olam. Adam Harishon is called the challah of the world. Why is Adam Harishon called the challah of the world? We're a little under the gun here time-wise, but very quickly, this is based on a Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah. The Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah says, what is challah? When a woman makes dough and is mafresh challah, she takes flour, she kneads it together with water, she creates a dough, then she separates from the dough the reishis arisaysechem, the truma of the challah. She separates what the Torah HaKadosh calls the best portion. And what does she do with it? She separates a piece to be mekayim the mitzvah of challah to give it to a kohen. And that piece that you're being mekayim the mitzvah of challah with, we call that truma. And reishis arisaysechem, that's the best part of the dough. Why? Because you be mekayim a mitzvah with it. So to Adam Harishon. How did the Rebbeinu Shalom make Adam Harishon? He took afar min ha'adama, that's the flour. He took dirt, and then he kneaded it. He made a lisha. The eid yale min ha'aretz. He took dew, that was the liquid, and he kneaded it. He made a dough, and from that he formed Adam Harishon's guf, and then he blew a neshama into it. So Adam Harishon is also the challah that was removed from that dough, and therefore Adam Harishon is called the chalasai shel olam. Chava imenu tripped up the chalasai shel olam by giving him from the Eitz Hadas. In order to be misakin that, she goes ahead and she performs the mitzvah of hafrashas challah on Erev Shabbos. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, v'ayin ba'achrayim, take a look at the achrayim who write, even people who are not makbid on Pas Yisrael, they rely on the cooler of Pas Palter, that you're allowed to eat the commercial baked goods of an Eina Yehudi. On Shabbos, they should refrain from that. Mishnah Berurah says it's a davar pashit. If you're an oinus, you pashit don't have bread to make kiddush on. You don't have yayin for kiddush. You're going to be mekadesh ala pas, and the only pas you have is kiyam al pashel enam yehudim, like what would often happen to Yiddish soldiers. Yachal Kaddish alav, you're allowed to make Kiddush on Pas Palter under pressing circumstances. Says, let's finish out the Ramah over here. Says the Ramah, Yesha Kasru, there are those that write, that in some places, Nagu Lechel Mulyasa, the minig was to eat a meat-filled pastry, Shekarin Pastida, Balel Shabbos on Friday night. Why? Zeichel Aman, because this would be a zeicher to the man. Shahaya mechusa lamayla ulamata. We know that the man was delivered to Klal Yisrael in a sandwich. There was dough underneath, dough on top. So as a zeicher to the man, you eat this meat-filled pastry. V'loy re'isi lachash lazeh. The Ramah says he doesn't see anybody who's makbid on this. Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'loy re'isi. Over Mekai Seinu, the Chavetz Chaim says in our regions, haminig la'achlan, the minig is taka, to eat just such a pastida. Very quickly, I just want to read to you, if you take a look at the Biur Halacha, Dibra Maschil, v'hu mikvayt Shabbos, he brings down that there's a remez that it's covered Shabbos to bake to specifically bake for Shabbos, because the pasuk by the Mon says that on Erev Shabbos, Eis Asher Toifu Eifu. What you need to bake, you should bake. So you see that there's an Indian to bake for Shabbos. Then he says, very startling, Uba Avoynei Seinu Arabim. Hayom nowadays, his chilu Eis Enoshim, some women have begun, lahashbis haminig ahu, to let go of this minig, v'loikhin min ha'oifeh. And they buy challah from the bakery. Valav shaper avdi, and it's improper what they're doing. The maktinim bazek kvod Shabbos, because they are minimizing kvod Shabbos by doing that. Also, just very quickly, based on the next biur halacha, I just want to tell you over. It's very interesting. The Mishnah Berurah brings down, the Ramah brings down this minig of eating pastida as a zeichel amon. The Chavetz Chaim in the biur halacha asks, he says it's very startling. Why do we make a zeichel to the mon on Shabbos? On Shabbos there was no mon. So the biur halacha comes out, and the biur halacha says, you know why? Because I mentioned this in the previous year. L'asad lavai is yom shekuloi Shabbos. He brings down that l'asad lavai, we're going to have mon. So if we're going to have mon l'asad lavai, so then mon is very appropriate to Shabbos. So make a zeichel mon. To me, as I said in the previous, I think I said it in the Hakdama shir, it also makes sense. It's very appropriate. He brings down Taisus that says this, but he's startled by Taisus. I don't know why. Taisus says, yeah, you make a Zeichet to Mon on Shabbos exactly because no Mon fell on Shabbos. Chavetz Chaim says he doesn't understand that. But I think Pshat, I'm not going to say that I know better than the Chavetz Chaim, Chas Chalila, but to me, Pshat is very simple. The pasuk says in Bereshis that the Rabbani Shalom, Vayavarech Elokim es Yom HaShvi, Vayikadesh Yisrael. Rashi says, Barchehu b'mon, he blessed Shabbos with mon, that a double portion of mon fell on Erev Shabbos for Shabbos, that's a bracha for Shabbos, and Kadshehu b'mon, that no mon fell on Shabbos. So yes, the Rebbeinu Shalom benched Shabbos, and was Mekadesh Shabbos through mon. So it's very appropriate to make a Zeichel Mon on Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This list of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's refuahs parnasos sheduchim tov al zenid. We should be zeicher to see the BS Gal Tzedek b'mehera v'yameinu amen. Be well.